Okay, so this is hopefully going to be a quick uh, run through of the poem Piano. I'm going to give you a brief overview of it, read it, and then take you through my analysis. And hopefully at the end of it, you'll have a decent level of understanding in relation to the themes, ideas, and some of the features you can focus on when you come to write in the exam. So as a poem, Piano explores the powerful hold that childhood memories can exert upon you. Listening to a woman singing to him in the first line transports the speaker uh, back to his childhood, where the mum is playing the piano in the parlour. She's singing hymns, uh, and essentially the speaker weeps with longing. He wants to experience childhood again, yet he recognizes and understands that he can't. The central ideas and themes in it are by the central. It's really a poem about memories, and it's quite melancholic. There's a deep sadness that he can't experience his childhood again, and the recognition that it's gone and it's over. The past can't be relived. But I suppose the memory itself is fundamentally a positive one, and there's a sort of nostalgia to the whole idea in the poem. So let's have a read of it. So it goes, piano. Softly in the dusk, a woman is singing to me, taking me back down the vista of years till I see a child sitting under the pianos in the boom of the tingling strings and pressing the small poised feet of a mother who smiles as she sings. In spite of myself, the insidious mastery of song betrays me back till the heart of me weeps to belong to the old Sunday evenings at home with winter outside and hymns in the cosy parlour, the tinkling piano our guide. So now it is vain for the singer to burst into clamour with the great black piano appassionato. The glamour of childish days is upon me. My manhood is cast down in the flood of remembrance. I weep like a child for the past. So, like I said, the poem is a very nostalgic one. It's centered around memory and the power of it. And obviously, we get a sense of the speaker's childhood and their relationship with their mother and their sort of family and home life, I guess. Let's just work through the poem from sort of beginning to end. So the first line, softly in the dusk, a woman is singing to me, establishes sort of a soothing, calm mood. That's achieved primarily through the sounds that are used in this first line and throughout the opening stanza, really. And you can see that with the sort of soft sibilants in softly in dusk. Interestingly, and a nice structural point that you could make is that over the course of the poem, this mood shifts and it changes and it becomes sort of increasingly emotive and dramatic. And you'll see that in the third stanza. Another nice form point, or another form point to sort of make a note of, is the rhyme scheme. It's couplets all the way through, as you can see. And I think that creates, I mean, it's like a simple rhythmic rhyme scheme, but there's a melodic quality to it, a song-like quality to it. And in a poem, I suppose, where music is the catalyst for this memory and this reliving of the past, it's quite fitting that the poem itself is quite melodic and song-like and musical in rhythm and sound. Okay, so I was talking about the way in which mood and atmosphere is established in the first line, and I think that sort of developed throughout the first stanza. And you can see in this final line, pressing the small poised feet of a mother who smiles as she sings, that there's quite an excessive, heavy use of sibilants, that repetition of the S sounds. And I think that feeds into the way in which home and family life is represented in the poem. And you can see on line 9 or 8 and 9 where the speaker is in their memory, and they're talking about the Sunday evenings, winter's outside, there's hymns in the cozy parlor. But this image that's constructed of the speaker's home life is one of safety and warmth, security. It feels like the speaker is sort of cocooned almost in this womb-like state, protected and safe. And it's possibly that feeling that is what he's longing for really in the poem. Sort of as an adult, he realizes that he's sort of, lost and alone in what could be a scary, frightening world. But as a child, he was cocooned in the love and warmth of his family home with his mother in the cozy parlours. And I think you can see that by the stuff I've highlighted to you. It's interesting to note at the start of the second stanza that the speaker himself doesn't want, they're reluctant to remember. It says, in spite of myself, and they're betrayed back by the song. It's clearly a source of emotional pain, despite it being a really positive memory. And that's why I'd sort of described it as being quite melancholic in mood and tone. It's a lovely memory and something to recall, but it also comes with like a sadness that it can't be relived and that it's gone. This image here, when he talks about the heart of me weeps to belong to the old Sunday evenings, it's obviously an emotive, powerful metaphor. The heart of me is weeping. And so we're starting to see the build-up of emotion that continues throughout to the end, where he's weeping again. So something you might want to talk about is the movement from metaphorical weeping, the heart of me is weeping, to probably literal weeping, when he's weeping like a child, literally crying at the end of the poem, as his manhood has been cast down, and he's left sort of in this vulnerable childlike state, demonstrating the power of memory. Moving through into the final stanza, the language here is becoming increasingly emotive and dramatic. Talks about singer bursting into clamour, his manhood being cast down in the flood of remembrance. He's weeping like a child. This is a poem that is exploring very strong emotion, and the speaker is feeling quite extreme emotion as a response to this memory. So again, we're seeing this overwhelming power that is also of the memory, which is also captured, I think, in being cast down in the flood of remembrance. The power, the overwhelming, unstoppable force of the memory. It leaves the speaker in this broken state at the end, weeping like a child, which is another interesting little simile that shows that there's been a sense of regression in the poem. He's moved from like a man to a child. A couple of just general things I would say just before I finish. It's interesting to note that the poem is filled with concrete details, and I've listed a few here. It's Sunday evening. They're in the parlour. The season is identified as winter. She's singing hymns. It even talks about the fact that her feet are small and poised. She's smiling. So there's loads and loads and loads of little concrete details. I think that feeds into the idea that the memory that the speaker has is a really vivid, powerful one. It's almost tangible. I think that's complemented by the phonological features of the poem. I've said here it's phonologically rich, full of sort of sensory, auditory words. There's a lot of onomatopoeia in there, boom, tingling, burst, clamour, to name a few. There's sibilance, there's alliteration, there's assonance, and you can sort of pick those out if you look a bit more closely at the poem. And I think that all feeds into this idea of the memory being a very powerful, tangible one. The speaker's actually living it almost. Also, one last thing I think is probably worth making a note of. I think it's true that in each stanza that there's a movement within them. It starts in the present and ends in the past. So you look at that first stanza, softly in the dust, so they're in the present, but then at the end of it, they're sitting under the piano. And it's the same in the second stanza, talking about the song that he's listening to in the present, but at the end of the stanza, he's in the hymn. He's listening to the hymns in the cozy parlour. Again, third stanza starts by talking about the singer that he's listening to, but it ends with him, I suppose, not necessarily in the past, but weeping for it. So there's generally a sense of movement from the present to the past, which I think you could argue, demonstrate the power of memory and the idea that your past is inescapable. So, in summary, it's a bittersweet. Well, the poem captures the bittersweet, melancholic process of remembering a lost childhood.